Hello, very beautiful community. Bad day for Ukraine, so let's talk about it. Ukraine's parliament voted to bring under government control some key anti-corruption agencies, which would mean, if Zelensky signs this, that you are not going to have anti-corruption institutions that aren't subordinate to the government. And this is part of a longer run campaign in Ukraine to undermine anti-corruption checks and balances. And we know that checks and balances is what it's all about. Power, checking power to keep your democracy on the road is what makes you a happy camper as a democratic citizen. Now, we know some countries that are spectacularly undemocratic, and one example we often talk about in Europe is Russia. And it's worth noting, and this is where I think we need to land, because this is the key analysis I want to offer, how this serves Putin's purposes. There's nothing more that Putin would like than for Ukraine to slide toward dysfunctional, corrupt authoritarianism. So let's talk about the fallout from this. Now, Zelensky has demonstrated with this that he is sitting on a legitimacy gap that he doesn't know how to bridge with his citizens. This will not go down well in Ukraine. And it's an abusive action toward Ukrainian citizens who are being asked to mobilize by the government. I don't just mean militarily mobilize, I mean mobilize in every sense, at a very difficult moment, with very precarious allies, a very inept but also relentless opponent. And at the same time, without a clear picture of a future. What does it mean for Ukraine to win this war? What's the government's strategy for the country's future, right? Militarily, politically, economically. That's not being articulated by the Zelensky administration. So this is very, very uncool toward Ukrainians. Then this is very uncool toward anybody who wants Ukraine to progress toward the EU. I mean, these anti-corruption institutions were set up at the behest of the European Union. This is very uncool for anybody who wants to dissuade Westerners from saying, well, there's a couple of dickheads fighting in Eastern Europe. One dickhead is worse than the other, bigger than the other. But if the other dickhead's a dickhead too, why should we be bothered by this? Let them figure it out between themselves. It makes it harder to challenge that narrative in the West. This also plays into Russian propaganda that falsely claims that the central purpose of Ukraine's acquisition of Western arms and Western support is corruption rather than resisting Russian imperialism. And finally, of course, this just dampens the mood in Western capitals. I wouldn't go overboard by talking about feelings of outrage and betrayal, but there are certainly feelings of exasperation and frustration in Western capitals. But the key thing to understand here is not how this plays into Russian propaganda, but actually how this simply favors Putin's aspirations in the conflict. And I dropped on social media a couple of lines about this. I'll just read to you. The dismantling of anti-corruption safeguards in Ukraine has sparked talk of Ukraine losing the peace whatever happens in the war. But this framing misses something crucial. Putin's theory of victory is to pressure Ukraine until it irreversibly poisons its own politics. So the Ukraine could self-destruct domestically without losing to Putin line misses the point that it's Putin's main aim in the war in Ukraine for Ukraine to self-destruct domestically. And we've got to be very clear about that. And we've got to be very clear to not separate this business of Ukraine winning the war and Ukraine winning the peace. because it's Ukraine's failure to win the peace that is Putin's functionally and indeed at the level of self-conscious intent aim in this entire enterprise. It's enough for today. Lots and lots of love.